Hello everyone and welcome to this video podcast on the last days. My name is David and the title of this opening episode is The End is Near, with a subtitle emphasizing the fact that this end of the world prediction has proven itself to be wrong over and over again. This is episode 1. I found this meme depicting a hairy caveman crouched down while chiseling in stone the words, "The end is near," rather amusing and suggestive, as in suggesting that perhaps the very first words ever carved into stone by man were those of a doomsayer prophesying doomsday and the end of the world. And yet here we are, thousands and perhaps tens of thousands of years later, and the end has still not come. Nonetheless, the restoration of the gospel being designated the latter days by we Latter-day Saints is suggestive in its own right that the end is near. Else, why call it the latter days? Besides, the Lord himself declares again and again that the hour is nigh and the day soon at hand, when he will appear in all his glory, and the wicked will be as stubble. So it is not just doomsayers who are declaring that the end is near. The entire Christian world is declaring the same thing. The question, of course, for most of us is, how near? And for an answer to that question, we can either look to doomsday prophets or prophetic timelines found within the scriptures, including the parable of the fig tree. Speaking of the coming of the Lord and the kingdom of God in these latter days, we read the following in Matthew chapter 24, verses 32 through 33. "Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors." We will investigate the parable of the fig tree with all its implications for these latter days in a later episode. But for now, let us return to our doomsday prophets and prophetic timelines. After all, the question arises as to what the difference is between doomsday prophets and prophetic timelines as found in the scriptures, if they both declare that the end is near. One notable difference among many that could be named is that doomsday prophets set target dates, while prophetic timelines set prophetic markers, and avoid setting dates of future events under the biblical banner that no one knows the day nor the hour of Christ's coming. In short, set target dates end up setting off one false alarm after another. For example, consider all the hysteria surrounding the year 2000 and Y2K. This was a target date set for the end of the world by a great many doomsayers. And yet, here we are in the year 2022, and still the end has not come. Prophetic timelines, however, set prophetic markers, such as the prophesied coming of Elijah, spoken by Malachi, before the great and dreadful day of the Lord should come, which prophetic marker was fulfilled in the Kirkland Temple in the year 1836, as recorded in Doctrine and Covenants, section 110. After this vision of Elias had closed, another great and glorious vision burst upon us. For Elijah the prophet, who was taken to heaven without tasting death, stood before us, and said, "Behold, the time is fully come, which was spoken of by the mouth of Malachi, testifying that he, Elijah, should be sent, before the great and dreadful day of the Lord come, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the children to the fathers, lest the whole earth be smitten with a curse. Therefore the keys of this dispensation are committed into your hands, and by this you may know that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is near, even at the doors." We see here then, in the year 1836, another prophetic marker leading up to the second coming of Christ that was fulfilled in these latter days. This leads us to ask, why are many Latter-day Saints suspicious of prophetic timelines? Could this be a result of confusing these prophetic timelines with doomsday prophets proclaiming the end is near, who have proven to be wrong, wrong, and wrong again so many times? Or is there more to it than this? By the way, those are not sunglasses that this doomsayer is wearing, but blinders, as in blind faith, which is a problem all on its own. But back to our narrative. I would suggest that there is more to it than a mere association of prophetic timelines with doomsday prophets. And this is because prophetic timelines have proven to be problematic as well, and in many cases have proven to be just as wrong as the doomsayers, particularly those prophetic timelines associated with evangelical preachers and the sequence of the end-time events. Here, for example, is a typical evangelical end-times timeline, which puts what they call the rapture ahead of the prophesied 7 years of tribulation, which tribulation, they claim, is to take place right before the return of Christ in all his power and glory to destroy the wicked. Now, from a Latter-day Saint understanding of these same end-time events, these evangelical preachers get so many things wrong that it is easy to see why doomsday prophets are not our only problem, as the hundreds of prophetic timelines made available throughout Christendom and on the internet have also proven to be wrong, wrong, and wrong again. And this adds another layer of suspicion to these prophetic timelines and end-time scenarios. Now, there may be those among the Latter-day Saints viewing this who are not familiar with this evangelical notion of a heavenly rapture preceding the 7 years of tribulation. But if you have ever watched the Left Behind film series, or came across any of the numerous and popular books on the rapture, which currently are a hot commodity given the times we are living in, you might be surprised to know that the biblical notion of the rapture itself is taken from the writings of the Apostle Paul, where he writes to the Thessalonian saints in these words: "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we, which are alive and remain, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words." You might be more familiar with these words of Christ, taken from the book of Matthew. "Then shall be fulfilled that which is written, that in the last days 2 shall be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. 2 shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. And what I say unto one, I say unto all men, Watch therefore, for ye know not at what hour your Lord doth come." And so the underlying concept of a heavenly rapture is correct, but their understanding of it in their end-time timelines are not. By the way, notice that this particular book adds to this misunderstanding by selling a target date for the rapture, as well as a proclaimed knowledge of how and when the world ends, which future target date is a clear example of what prophetic timelines should not do. Unless, of course, you truly are a prophet of God and have been directed to do so. In any event, future target dates prove problematic and dangerous as well, as we shall see in the next episode of this series. An example of both doomsday prophets and prophetic timelines proving problematic is the Y2K bug in the year 2000, which resulted in exciting both a doomsday and rapture fever. Let me explain. Here we have what I shall refer to as God's prophetic timeline of the 7,000 years of the Earth's temporal existence, from 4000 BC at one end of the timeline to 3000 AD at the other. This timeline of 7 1,000-year blocks of time is prophetic in the sense that it is taken from the Bible and the writings of the Apostle John in the book of Revelation, pertaining to a book shown to John sealed with 7 seals. Commenting on these verses in a question and answer format, the prophet Joseph Smith reveals the following. Question: What are we to understand by the book which John saw, which was sealed on the back with 7 seals? Answer: We are to understand that it contains the revealed will, mysteries, and the works of God, the hidden things of his economy concerning this earth during the 7,000 years of its continuance, or its temporal existence. And so that is the scriptural basis for this prophetic timeline. But let's continue to build it out. At one end of the timeline, we have the fall of man, and at the other end of the timeline, a scriptural marker that marks a time at the end of the world wherein there will be time no longer. Now notice that before the fall of man, I simply make reference to the infinite nature of eternity preceding it, and the eternity to follow it at the other end, both typifying the idea that the Earth's 7,000-year temporal existence came out of eternity and then, in a sense, slips back into eternity. Nonetheless, within this timeline, let us locate a timeline marker for the coming of Christ in the meridian of time, or approximately 0 AD, and follow this with another timeline marker indicating what has proven to be, for most doomsayers and prophetic timelines, the prophetic year 2000. Why has it proven problematic? Because most biblical scholars recognize the end of the 6,000-year time period and the beginning of the 7,000-year time period to be the biblical scheduled time for the beginning of the millennium. And not only that, with the opening of the seventh seal, we have the coming of Christ in the clouds of heaven in glory and great power. And, of course, immediately preceding this, or in conjunction with these momentous events, is the longed for and hoped for rapture of the church. But this is not all. We mustn't forget all the hysteria surrounding the Y2K bug and the doomsday scenarios predicting a computer glitch that results in nuclear power plants melting down, planes falling from the skies, and the end of the civilized world as we once knew it. So at midnight on New Year's Eve, the clock struck 12, and nothing. No major computer glitches, no rapture, no second coming, and no millennium. Just life carrying on as usual. And so here we are in the year 2022, and still nothing. With lots of doomsday prophets reneging on their predictions, and all of Christendom revamping their prophetic timelines. This, of course, has brought out all the secular hecklers and scoffers who were delighted to see all the Christian believers scrambling and panicking to make sense of what just happened, or rather, didn't happen. The Apostle Peter described this very day and this very situation in these prophetic words. Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lust, and saying, Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. In other words, life as usual carries on. Elsewhere, and in a revelation to the prophet Joseph Smith, we find a similar prophetic warning. And in that day shall be heard of wars and rumors of wars, and the whole earth shall be in commotion, and men's hearts shall fail them, and they shall say that Christ delayeth his coming until the end of the earth. Oddly enough, these scoffers and naysayers are themselves part of the prophetic timeline, and go contrary to the parable of the fig tree, wherein we are told that once these signs of the times begin to appear, that summer is nigh, even at the doors. Still, we Latter-day Saints must also address the problematic nature of the biblical timetable that we see before us. After all, the year 2000 has come and gone, without these major prophetic events transpiring as expected. But we must address these timetable issues by learning to separate the wheat from the chaff, the legitimate prophetic timelines and markers from the illegitimate ones. This call to separate the wheat from the chaff, the legitimate prophetic timelines from the illegitimate ones, brings us to the end of this episode and to our first prophetic timeline alert, and that is this. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, for prophetic timelines are key to unlocking how near we are to Christ's return. Yes, Christ delayeth his coming, as many of the scoffers will say, but not until the end of the world, as they wrongly suppose, but just prior to it, lest there is no flesh left on the earth to save. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh left to be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Nonetheless, until that moment comes when Christ steps in to stop mankind from completely destroying itself, one may expect one delay after another before his coming. So, it will not surprise you that the next episode in this series on the last days is entitled, "The Lord Delayeth His Coming," with a subtitle declaring, "Delays, delays, and more delays." Thank you for watching. Push the like button if you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to push the subscribe button. Until next time, stay vigilant, for you know neither the day nor the hour of his coming.